welcome back to the Secrets of Happily Ever After. I'm here with my new friend, Michelle Purta, is a married mom of three and a life and marriage coach for moms. She helps women who crave better communication, deeper connection, and more collaboration with their partners. Along with being a coach, she's also a host of the Marriage and Motherhood podcast, where she shares tips and insight that help women empower themselves to create a happier and more fulfilling life and marriage. Welcome, Michelle. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here.
Good. Well, we're so excited to learn from you. So I will just start out with the question I'm asking all of the experts on this summit. And that is, if you had the undivided attention of all the married couples in all the world for just a few minutes, for just a few moments, what is the most important concept you could teach them about how to live happily ever after with their spouse?
It starts with us. It really does. It often feels like, we need the other person to change, but we only have control over ourselves. And that was like the biggest aha moment for me in my personal journey to creating more fulfilling relationships in my life. And that's going to continue being something that I teach my clients and that I continue telling people through all my social media platforms that it truly does start with us. And that is the most empowering way for us to create more happiness in our relationships.
So good. So good. So tell me the story. What led you to become a marriage coach for moms?
Yeah, so it kind of just like fell into it. I used to work for corporate, but then ended up quitting. And I was looking for my life purpose, and someone had recommended that I look into life coaching because of how I tackle problems with, how I help my friends, how I look at the world. And so I realized after talking to a bunch of women that I had a lot to say about relationships, and it makes a lot of sense because I did not grow up with the foundation of how to have and create healthy relationships. I very much had to stumble my way through it throughout my teenage and adult years, only to find that I had a lot of work to do. I had a lot of unlearning to do from my parents' relationship. And that led to a really beautiful journey to the marriage I have today, which is full of open, vulnerable communication, really fun, nourishing connection, and also a really supportive partnership. And so now I get to help women in being able to create the same because it's not our fault that we weren't taught this at a young age, but we are accountable for doing what we can to change our future experience of our relationships. So that's how I became a marriage coach for moms.
I think that's really amazing because a lot of us do come from backgrounds or families where it's now our opportunity as adults to change the generational cycle of kind
Yes.
of dysfunction in relationships. And I think it takes a lot of courage and bravery to say, these patterns end with me, and I'm going to now take responsibility and make it better for my kids and for their kids.
100%. That is absolutely the reason why I do it. I mean, also for selfish reasons, because I get to reap the benefits of doing the work myself and having a more fulfilling relationship. But it's also like the pride that I get from like knowing that this is the example that my kids get to have. And I just have so much hope for what type of relationships they're going to have and the things that they're going to skip over because my husband and I have been doing the work because we're showing them, hey, this is how you handle immature, loving relationships. It doesn't have to be disrespectful. It doesn't have to be like really intense, even. It gets to be really adult like, and you get to be proud of how you behave.
Yeah, that's so good. I say all the time, like it took me so long to learn certain things, and I'm like, if I can just like make that time shorter for my kids, like my especially my girls, if I can just have them learn it quicker than I did, like just all the pain that I could save them, hopefully. I mean, I
Exactly.
know they'll make their own mistakes, but if I can save them a little bit of that, you just heartache. But so I love what you do. But Tell us, what are some of the ways marriage changes after you become a mom? And what are the biggest problems you see arise from that transition of becoming like, young and in love and the whole world is your oyster. And then all of a sudden you're responsible for this little human that cries
Yeah.
all the time.
This is a big question. So I'm gonna be like, I'll try to be brief about it. But like before kids, you have all the time in the world, even though it seems like you're busy, right? You have more time than you will as parents. You also have more energy. And you kind of have like rose-colored lens on, right? You're like happy, you're able to go on dates more often. Like everything you do is considered a date, whether you're going out to dinner or you're running off to some like spontaneous trip. Like everything is exciting, and then come kids and your schedule starts to get packed and filled with things to keep these kids alive or entertained or just more responsibility in general. And then you start to get more tired, you have less energy, but also the problems that were already there that you may have kind of glossed over become highlighted because you're less patient, you're more stressed, you're more exhausted, your capacity to be more kind and compassionate shrinks. And so we're more easily triggered. And then you have bigger decisions that you have to decide together versus what are we eating for dinner? You're more deciding how are we raising these kids together? How are we going to choose to guide these young human beings to becoming their highest potential of themselves and who they're meant to be. And also our childhood triggers come up, right? Like, oh, I really didn't like how he did that, or I didn't like how she did that. So a lot of conversations aren't like had and decisions are not made prior to having kids because having kids is really exciting and you don't want to talk about that stuff beforehand about how are we going to raise them, how do you discipline, how are you disciplined, what are your thoughts on this, and money issues. So a lot of pressure gets added onto the relationship, and a lot of couples aren't prepared for that. And so they feel like they're in survival mode, right? And when we're in survival mode, a lot of stuff kind of just goes off by the wayside, and we forget how to be kind, right? We feel like we don't have the capacity to be kind. That's really what it is.
Yeah. Well, what can couples do to work together to make that transition smoother for both moms and for dads?
Yeah. So would this be for couples who are about to have kids or already have kids?
Both. Like, if you've
Yeah.
already got kids and you're like, clearly we're not handling this transition
Yeah. Yeah.
very well. Or what can they do to prepare? Definitely.
Yeah. So if you're in the preparation phase, definitely have like conversations with couples who already have kids. Like,
Mhm.
hey, what are some troubles that you have experienced since becoming parents that we need to think about and have those conversations in private, like maybe even set aside time alone to really think through how you want things to go, how your partner wants things to go, and come together and create a united vision for how you're going to handle things, and take more of a proactive approach. Like, okay, this is likely going to happen. When this happens, how do we want to handle this? Or what can we do to prevent this from happening, to make sure that we're constantly checking in with each other, prioritizing our relationship with ourselves and also with each other above the kids, so that the kids can still grow up in a loving and nurturing home rather than what most often happens. It becomes really intense, and it's high conflict, right? So that's for the people who are
The last
preparing. For
time.
those who are knee deep in it, I see you. I also floundered in the beginning stages, and it's really about taking a pause and zooming out, right? If you're noticing there's a pattern, like we fight however often, or we're fighting about this issue however often, take a pause, think about what's the best way for us to survive through this issue right now. How can we come together? What is it that I'm needing, that I feel like I need support with? Ask him to do the same, right? And have that conversation about, okay, clearly what we're doing is not working. Let's put our heads together, let's collaborate and figure out how we can each get our needs met And so we can come together as a stronger team for our family, for our marriage. It's oftentimes that we go into this autopilot mode because we feel so tired, we don't have time to do anything, that we're actually missing opportunities to create growth in the marriage. Instead, you're just kind of letting each day pass. Instead, I challenge you to be like, no, I'm going to make time, because making time is what's going to save you time. It's going to save you the pain. So be proactive about it. Ask people who have the type of marriage that you want, what they do, what they recommend, what they observe about you, and have an open heart to really receiving and taking all feedback in, and then going from there. Or, work with a marriage coach like Monica or myself. Like, that's also an option as well.
Absolutely. And I actually think it's so important to bring in a neutral third party,
Mm,
not even when not like before you're struggling or if you're struggling, or because I think to get to those higher levels of a really happy, harmonious home and marriage, you have to, there's things that you can't see about yourself. And
yes,
so, and it's hard to take that feedback from your partner, especially when you're both in a cycle. And so a
definitely.
neutral third party can come in and see what's happening and can give you some feedback on like this is what you're both doing, and it's creating this negative feedback loop, and you guys are just
Yeah.
you keep going over and over and over in the same negative loop, and here's what you can do to kind of break free from
Yeah.
that. So
It's
I
like
mean,
getting tunnel vision, and Monica and I are not exempt from this. Like, if
right,
you're
yeah,
in it, like,
coaches,
it's
yeah,
gonna be hard you're gonna have blinders on because your ego is gonna wanna come out and say, "I'm right, I'm hurt," maybe play the victim, whatever story or narrative that tends to play in the background throughout your life that likely came from your childhood. Like, this is why having that third party insight and feedback could be really supportive for getting out of that, because something has to change in order for something to change, right? We can't just keep running into that brick wall hoping it's going to turn into a doorway. It just doesn't work out that way,
I love the
unfortunately.
way you said that. What are the different ways that the success of your marriage starts with you?
Yeah, I have 5 different ways that happily ever after really does start with us. Like I said earlier, it's really easy to just point the finger, like, if only he did this more often, or if she did this more often, then I would be happier and we would be good. Like, it really truly does start at the individual level, and it's all like, I'll just come out and say it. Like, the first one is how you feel determines how available you are to connect, right? If you're in a negative space, if you're feeling burnt out or stressed out, how likely are you going to want to hang out with your partner? Right? You're going to be crabby. You're going to have like this negative lens where you're not really putting any like fun into the dynamic. You're going to be kind of a party pooper. And so making sure that you take care of yourself, getting all your needs met is so, so important, because that's what sets us up to be available, to have fun, to be available for friendly banter, to be available for flirting, or having deep open conversations. Like, it just starts with us, and when we don't care about ourselves, right, because we're like, oh, I'm too busy, I don't have time to do things for myself, or I'm too it's too expensive to like do this. Like, you have to think about the impact, the larger impact that it has by neglecting yourself and allowing yourself to kind of come last in your life, when really you should be loving yourself most and letting everything come second. Okay. The second way is how you communicate influences how much your spouse is willing to collaborate, right? We choose how we come and show up in arguments, or even in how we ask for what we want. Now, if you're coming abrasively, like, imagine you're on the receiving end. They're going to be like, wall, defensive, not listening, I'm out of here. Or I'm just going to say whatever it is that you want to hear so that I can exit this conversation. And it's not really a dialogue anymore, right? And so making sure that you're really clear on, hey, how am I communicating? What kind of communicator do I want to be? And giving yourself the tools, learning whatever you need to learn and making whatever changes you need to make to have a more open, safe environment for both people to really be able to communicate what their needs are, what their wants are, and listen. Like that is the bigger piece, is being actively listening to your partner so that there is a two-way dialogue instead of a debate, right? Because like when you debate, you're just trying to prove yourself right. And that's not healthy for your marriage if that's your focus, right? There's time and a place for debate, but most times in a marriage, if you want to have it be successful, that is not the place for it, right? The third one is, how aware are you of your needs? And that determines how satisfied you are with your marriage, right?
Mm.
Oh, women, if you're watching this, we're like, we are so good at assuming our partners know what we want, only to be left feeling disappointed, right? We have this grand picture in our head of how the whole day is going to go, or how our date's going to go, or how they're going to do something, or what they're going to say in response to us. And then when it doesn't go how we want it to go, oh man, right? Like then it turns into this whole thing, right? We throw a fit or we give the cold shoulder, and they're left wondering what just happened. When really, although it seems unromantic to spell it out, right? I think it's actually more romantic because it shows that they're listening to. It shows that they're truly caring about you having your needs met. So the more clear you are about whatever it is you need, whether it's boundaries, support, love, affection, any and all of that, tell your partner. Don't leave any room for guessing. And if you do leave room for guessing, be open to being surprised, right? Like, don't go back and criticize what they did because you didn't give clear directions. Okay. The fourth one is, how aware are you of your triggers and emotions, right? This determines how you react or respond to conflict. And this can easily lead to us self-sabotaging ourselves, because when we lack that awareness of what upsets me and why, how do I feel and why do I feel this way, we can go back to our childhood patterns of doing things that actually get us farther away from what we want, which is likely deep connection in our marriage, open communication, supportive collaboration, and it could really backfire on you. But when you take the time to become more self-aware of what you're showing up with, how you're reacting, you can become more intentional about how you're responding to them, how you're presenting things, how you're acting. Like there is so much that we are responsible for, even just saying, oh, I'm responsible for myself, right? Like we heavily influence how our partner interacts with us and vice versa. So when we become more aware, we can be more proud of how we're being and then just focus on building bridges, building that connection, building closeness in the relationship, right? And then along that same vein, how intentional you are determines how lively your marriage feels, right? As parents, it's super easy to just be like, okay, time to wake up, get ready, get the kids ready, off to school, off to work, make dinner, go to bed, like rinse and repeat. It is so easy to fall into, okay, let's just do, get from point A to point B and rinse and repeat. But it really does take conscious effort to have that lively marriage, that fulfilling marriage that you desire. And it's all in how intentional you are with the small decisions that you make every day, right? Do you choose to greet each other with a smile on your face and really like express your gratitude? Do you do things to bring a smile to their face? Do you make sure that you're really being attentive when they're talking to you? And if you're not able to listen, letting them know when a better time is to talk, right? Are you being intentional with connecting with them? Or you're just like, oh, I'm too tired, and then letting it fall off? Or are you saying, oh, I'm too tired. How can I create more energy within myself, maybe tomorrow or maybe right now, to set myself up to connect, right? So it's all about making decisions from a place of, where do I want my marriage to grow into? and how can I get myself there? And making all those decisions align to that goal instead of being reactive, like, oh, I'm too tired, or it's too stressful right now, or I feel unattractive right now. Like taking those thoughts and really doing something about them to help you create the marriage that you want. So that's how it all starts. Like, it's so much. And that's why it works, right? There's so much that we can do just on our own without pointing the finger that can really influence our partners to grow alongside with us in creating a marriage that everyone can enjoy.
Yeah. What I love so much is, I mean, it was implicit in the question, but all five of those things, nothing has to do with what our partner is doing. I mean, if they're sitting on the couch watching TV and completely ignoring everything around them, you can still do these five things. Like, it
Yep.
doesn't matter what they're doing. You're not responding to them. You're not dependent on them. You're solely focusing on your side of the street, so to speak, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's so important. And I do like, for a long time, I was like, oh, you can fix your marriage all by yourself. But I don't believe that anymore. I believe a good marriage takes two people doing their
Absolutely.
part, but you don't do your spouse's part. You
No.
just do your part and then
Yes.
let them do their own part. So I think that is really, really so important to remember. And I think a lot of times you can jostle a troubled marriage into something really great
Oh,
if you will
100%.
just start doing your part, because your partner might be like, what is happening? Like, that is really something special, and you're changing the dynamic, and you're showing up differently. And I want to do the same thing. So
Yeah, I always compare it to like you guys are currently doing one type of choreography in your
yes,
dance, right? And if you just take a side step that varies from the original dance, you're already doing a different dance, right? No matter what you're doing, you're always in response to something else, right? So if you do something different, your partner's going to respond in kind, right? And like you said, you're not here to do their work, right? All you can do is be proud of how you're being, and they get to choose how they show up, knowing that, hey, I am doing everything I can to support this marriage. Are you willing to join me? Right? This is not a codependency kind of situation where you're like, well, if they do that, then
I
I will
know.
do this. Like, well, okay, if you put it that way, then you must not want your marriage to succeed very much because you're not willing to do what you need to do in order for things to change. Because if you're both playing the waiting game, you're just going to keep like staying stuck where you're at. What if all it takes is just someone to initiate, not do all the work, but just initiate something different and then continue forth? And just deciding along the way. It doesn't mean you're locked in, right? Like, it doesn't mean you're like, oh, well, if I did the work first, then it's gonna have to be like my way or the highway. No, you get to make pivots along the way depending on what your partner's doing. And you can do it in a loving, compassionate way throughout the whole thing.
I love it. So, so good. Let them know where they can find you and learn more about the work you do with moms.
Yeah, so you can tune into my podcast. It's called the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. You can join my private Facebook group. It's also called Marriage and Motherhood. Or you can follow me on Instagram, Michelle Purta Coaching. And I look forward to connecting with you.
Awesome. To learn more ways to deepen your intimacy and strengthen your relationship, make sure you watch this video next.